all know that this is being streamed on Emmanuel Baptist Church's Facebook page, and that the conversations and the speakers will be made available even after this time of it being streamed live, okay? So go ahead and tweet some of your friends and text them and let them know to engage in the conversation. Amen? So for each of our panelists, I have a couple of questions for each of you to answer, and then we'll take a couple of questions that have come from the audience. Is that all right? Okay. I'm like, you the public defender, brother? We gonna be friends. I work at the Family Justice Center, so we share mutual folks that are in power. Amen. So to all three of you, what can we be hopeful about as we address this issue for future generations of Americans? Is it possible to build a fair society at this moment in time? And I'm going to defer to my sister here.
Thank you. So I think that you saw a sample with Savannah that we are creating the future right now. And I have these beautiful ladies over here. I'm down to 2, 3. But when you see young people and you see them coming and you see them, they're engaged. Mm-hmm. These are the conversations. Savannah wrote her own speech. Nobody helped her. Mm-hmm. Nobody coached her. She and I didn't talk about this. She says, Dr. Bauer, can I say whatever I want? And the amazing thing is that I can say, yes, you can say whatever you want. Because that's how this starts, right? This is how we create safe space. And let's say that some of the things might have said, I don't see it this way, I don't agree with it. We need to be ready. We adults need to be ready to accept that.
That's right.
And to create safe space. So we're creating it, and I'm very, very hopeful.
Beautiful. Safe space is really, really critical, especially as we're dealing with and, trying to process conversations that are difficult. And that's why folks don't have and engage in difficult conversations, because the spaces haven't been safe. And unfortunately, churches have been one of the most unsafe places to engage in conversation. And many of us are operating under the myth and the illusion that because we're all part of the human race, that these issues are not critical, and that race and ethnic injustices and cultural divisiveness between us is not salient as we're engaging with one another, and how it is or is not informing the work that we do or do not do. So thank you for that. Who wants to go next? Again, what can we be hopeful about as we address this issue for future generations of Americans? Is it possible to build a fair society at this moment?
So I'll start off by saying that, I'm extremely hopeful. I mean, it's these type of difficult conversations that actually acknowledging is the first step. But I'll say this, that the other thing that we need to do is we all need to take personal responsibility.
That's right. And,
oftentimes I'm at, similar type of meetings, and you'll have individuals that'll say, where the question's posed, and and the answer is, well, it's very difficult. We're dealing with so many different silos. And I kind of sit there and I go, okay, all right, but the point is, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. And it's incumbent on all of us in our scope of responsibilities. Like for me, from a law enforcement perspective, there's a lot of issues. There's, from schools to poverty to jobs to, the officers, and there's a myriad of issues that are going on. So it's easy to sit back and say, well, it's a very complicated issue. Well, I'm tired of hearing that. Mm-hmm. And what we all need to do is say, okay, it's a complicated issue, but what am I going to do? What are all of us going to do in our sphere of responsibility to change it? And if we all work towards that, we can accomplish great things.
It's good. Beautiful.
Yeah, I love these questions. So I think, yes, when we think about the future, it starts by having conversations like this, mm-hmm. people showing up here to listen to this discussion and this topic of racial injustice. And then personally, I get really hopeful when I talk to the youth mm-hmm. and kids, and to see the way they are curious and thinking, and they are able to quickly identify something that is wrong, and they quickly want to fix issues. So that gives me hope. And in some weird way, I think technology gives me hope also. So when we think about the discussion we have around Black Lives Matter and the unarmed killing of the killing of unarmed black men in the streets by police officers, if it wasn't for these things, no, it wouldn't be a national discussion. Like, so many of us knew it was happening, but now we have evidence and proof, and it's on everyone's radar, and everyone's aware of it, and we can move to fix it and address it. The next part of that question, I have a little bit of a harder time with. Is it still possible to build a fair society at this moment of time? At this moment of time is when it's troubling for me, because we really have to, and I touched upon this in my talk, have to identify how massive the system is and how much effort it will take to undo it.
Yeah.
And when you think about just the financial piece to it, I mean, the finances and the money is driving so much of it. Now, we didn't even talk about this prison industrial complex that exists.
That's right.
And so, and I'm in Alameda County. It's liberal. We are a liberal part of the state. And the amount of money that is paid for probation, the sheriff's budget, this incarceration is astonishing. So we have to, as a society, think about that. And think about how we can reinvest that money into education, okay? Healthcare. There's so many things we need to be, and just to get down that road takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of real conversations, takes some people being unemployed, okay? I'm sorry, but it takes a whole rethinking and re-imaging as to how we do criminal justice.
So can I just add a little bit, because Brendon hit on something very important, both right now and during his speech about cages, right? And when we are also talking about social media, we have become a society that works through sound bites, and we forget, right? So for a little bit of time, Black Lives Matter, right? For a little bit of time, we talk about those immigrant kids that are caged, right? For a little bit of time, and then we forget, because we go into the Florence hurricane, and then we talk about something else, and we forget. We don't follow up, right? And so just to give you an example, yesterday, as I was getting ready to go to work at 7:30 in the morning, it was just like a sound by Brendon. The number of kids, children, in cages in the border has gone from 3,000 to 12,000, and nobody's paying attention. Just to tell you what happens when we don't follow up.
That's right.
Right? So it's about action, it's about never giving up. It's about perseverance, and I totally agree with you. It takes a lot of these very difficult decisions that we need to make, but we have to have perseverance, we have to have grit to make some of these decisions.
Thank you for that. That actually leads into the next question that came up, so I think we can go ahead in the interest of time, which is, in one sentence, what would you encourage the audience to do that could make a positive contribution to this issue? And I love that you said perseverance and grit. And I would offer that having these conversations in these spaces, especially in our faith spaces and our houses of worship, because one of the problems that I see, especially in my work working with survivors of sexual and domestic violence, is that there are not enough clergy people and people of faith renouncing the injustice. They're not renouncing it. They're not talking about it for the evil and the sin that it is. And they're also not talking about how the systems of some of our faith communities are perpetuating the racial injustice as well. And so I think that it's really critical that we continue to have these kinds of spaces. And the next time there's an offering like this, that we double and pack this house out. And then it gets so big that we have to end up going into another space, because people of faith are being more proactive and doing more than just praying about it. Hello, somebody. Let me go back over to the question. In what sentence, what would you do what would you encourage the audience to do to make a positive contribution to this issue? You spoke a little bit about it already, Chief, as well, but I think if you had something to offer.
You know, if there, in one sentence, I would say that everyone, if we truly believe in this, we all need to look internally, not necessarily externally, look internally and start making changes ourselves individually, and ask ourselves, what can we do to make this process better for all? If we all ask ourselves that, I think that's a great start.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Brendon.
It's going to be a run-on sentence, okay? Pay attention, be active, don't be a bystander, vote, and don't be reactionary. So one bad thing that happens, it's not all get up in arms and say, more incarceration, more harsh laws. Is that good?
That was very good.
So I will say, especially to my brothers and sisters in the faith, fear not and do not be afraid of disturbing the system.
Amen. I think we're going to be friends after
I
this.
think so,
Dr.
Sarai. We'll talk. Watch out.
Well, because the other part too, you know, this space in this context doesn't give us a whole lot of time to really dig into it, but we can't talk about injustice and not talk about the kind of sexism and other layers of intersectional oppressions in marginalized communities that come forward. And we talk about, I think one of the things that gives me hope, I was thinking through this question, is that nowadays there's an expanded definition of what violence is. And we're looking beyond just gun violence. We're looking beyond violence that includes just guns and blood, but we're actually looking at institutional violence, the violence that we enact towards one another by keeping and oppressing our women down, poor people down, individuals that do not have the same abilities down, individuals that don't have the same education. And so I think as we continue to expand our thinking and consciousness around violence and how violence ends up in the hands of someone who's shooting, then we can look through a more systemic level of change. I understand that there's some questions that folks submitted. How can I, an average person, create change at a governmental, political, and economic level?
Just vote.
So can I add to that too?
Yeah.
It's there are so many ways you can do it. There are so many organizations that are active and pushing back against this. And I think about in the Bay Area, in Oakland, we have Bay Area Legal Aid, we have All of Us or None, we have the Ella Baker Center, who are all pushing and advancing racial justice. And then voting, I say, is critical. Paying attention is critical. No, DAs are elected. You should pay attention to that. Pay attention to what legislation is being passed. So I'm telling you this. This is one that bothers me greatly. For 2 years now, I've been trying to get a bill passed. And that bill is about people who can sit on juries. So right now, in the state of California, if you have a felony conviction, no matter how old it is, you cannot sit as a juror. No matter how, 20 years old, 30 years old, you can't be a juror. By that, you are eliminating 30% of black men from sitting as jurors. So when you talk about a jury of your peers, it doesn't exist.
It's not your peers.
The system feeding itself? You see how it works. 2 years, that bill's dead, been trying to get it passed, okay? Legislators won't support it. One of the reasons I've heard is that jurors don't want to be next to felons. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Well, they're different. It'll make it unfair. As if it's fair already.
Right.
So, all right.
I'll just, I don't know if I could follow up with that excitement, but that energy. But, you know, one of the things that I think we all need to realize as well is that when we talk about in the area of implicit bias is not just a law enforcement issue. It's not a criminal justice issue. Everyone is, if you're human, implicit bias exists. It exists in all of us. And so when little things that happen, I mean, I'll tell you again, from a law enforcement perspective, neighbors talking is fantastic. It's a great way to keep communities safe. But there are some social media platforms that neighbors talk to each other throughout the city that I have read some crazy things. That in particular parts of the city, someone is saying, watch out for the corner of X Street and X Street because I just saw a Latino male in the neighborhood. We need to get the police out here. And I'm actually not kidding. I mean, those type, and so what I'm saying is you may not say to yourself, I have no implicit bias, but, and you check yourself. Check yourself. When you're walking or driving, check yourself. Did you look at someone twice? And then ask yourself, why did I look at him twice? I mean, so check yourself. So, I mean, when we say that, this implicit bias is, a law enforcement issue, public defenders, DAs, what have you, it exists in all of us, and we need to check ourselves.
May I add just one more thing, Sarai?
Sure.
When you were talking about the kinds of violence, I think that if we consciously prevent ourselves from using violence, the way we speak to each other, the way that we accept to be spoken to, says a lot about that, and that's how it stops, right? So we need to check the way we talk to each other and the kinds of things we accept in our everyday talk towards each other. That's how we can start.
I agree. Yeah, moving beyond just, I have black friends. Let's go to the, okay. Our educators, police, and public defenders are all trying to reach the youth to help shape a better future. How can pastors and churches partner with these efforts? Great question. How can pastors, clergy people, lay folks who are in leadership partner with you all in your efforts?
Well, let me just start, because I'll just say this, that we have been. I mean, I know we have been partners for a while, whether it's dealing with our pact or whether it's dealing with Pastor Jason. I mean, I will tell you this, I think this is the third or fourth time that I've been here. We had an event where the congregation came to our substation, and we had conversations. So, so it's happening now, and it's just about, we've always said, and as Pastor Jason says, we have to be able to build these relationships where if we are in crisis, we're going to have to sit across from each other to get through it.
That's right.
And so just having, being able, the optics are important. The doing is even more important, but the optics are important when we're talking about mutual respect and holding each other accountable. When the community sees that, oh wow, the chief and police officers are they're at a service, and they're talking to the community and we're partnering with each other. It's important, and it happens, and it's happening now, and it's helping our relationships.
It's great. That's encouraging, especially for some of the other pastors that are in the room that are looking to extend this conversation into your own congregations and faith communities. I'm not trying to put any more work on your plate, Pastor Jason, but I think it'll be worth it to have some conversations with area pastors around your entree into this process of engagement.
Is the bishop still here? Is Bishop Days here? No, I thought he was here. Okay, we've gone through. We've done a little tour on places.
So educators, public.
I just wanted to invite everybody to come to our schools. It's as easy to showing up to a school event and
right.
become part of the community. Don't be afraid. Come on in and say hi. How are you? I'm your neighbor.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Invite us. Invite us into your space. And I think it's probably sometimes the public defender's fault also. We're not available, but invite us. Invite me, I will come. And there's also, I think, something that people see is scary about the courts and criminal justice system. We're trying to change that because there is power in community. There's power in community showing up to court.
That's right.
There's power in community keeping eyes on court to see what happens, because the courts are this big system and all of it happens, a lot of it in secret. They're public courts, but the public doesn't know what's going on. So court watch, coming and seeing it, saying, hey, you know what, we're going to hold you accountable to do your job, okay? We're going to hold you, judge, accountable to do your job. We don't like all these black and brown people in jail. What are you going to do about it, DA? What are you going to do about it? Public defender, your people aren't doing their job representing our families. What are you going to do about it? Come see us, come talk to us, and invite us into the space.
Beautiful, thank you. And we have just run out of time. We're at 0 time. Thank you all for engaging and for your questions that you did submit. My advice would be to continue to post those questions on the Facebook live stream. No guarantee that each and every question will be answered, but at least the conversation will be happening. And the Facebook platform definitely provides that. And I really appreciated your homework assignment that you gave us. And some of that could be just to be sharing in addition to the homework you already have, if you're not too traumatized from having to do homework in other areas. But just be willing to share some of those conversations and questions that you've shared with some of your peers that are with you and or folks that weren't able to make it today. Thank you so much.
Can I say those books again? That was asked to say it
please
again.
do. Yeah, absolutely.
Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. Brian Stevenson, Just Mercy. And Ava DuVernay's film, The 13th.
Thank you
on
all.
Netflix, yes.
Thank you all for your engagement. Wonderful. Great job.